At it. Uh, we still focus on these ancient sailors, Uh, right now, I want to focus on the constellation of the swan, the eagle, and if you always heard me say it before, the Southern Cross, the Northern Cross, the Pillars of Hercules. We've been going over this over and over again. A lot of people watch the videos and don't even be like, "Yeah, man, how a player told me that or whatever." Not that I'm doing it for all this motherfucking credit or clout, but I definitely give people they just do whenever I learn something great for them. So I would like the same respect, in return. But we ain't even worried off that. We gonna keep it playing. We gonna keep it moving. And right here, we read this before. It says it's strange that the Queen of Sheba should have come down to us as a sex goddess, and what the Bible writers thought worth mentioning about her and her meeting her was her intellectuality. They tell us that when she came to Jerusalem, to the city where Solomon had made silver to be as stones, and the cedars like sycamores, and a veil of abundance, it was to prove that the hard questions. Another legend to rumor that the legend repeats the theme of questioning intelligence is a form of tenuous but fascinating tie between the Library of Archives and the Church and the Discovery of America. One of Columbus' officers, the able but rebellious Martin Alonzo Pinzon, captain of the Pinta, you know, of Boss, of vast ancestry. You know about those dark-skinned Boss people, well, they used to be dark-skinned. Now you look at them today, you don't know who them people are. If you read the historical records, same way with anywhere over there in Egypt, the records do not match the modern people. It just is what it is. I ain't gonna try to take no history from nobody. Just know that you probably related my fellow white man to the Moors. That's all. You're walking around with these Moorish last names, you know where you got it from. But that's nor here nor there. You feel me? We're gonna keep it playing. We're gonna keep it pimping. We're gonna pimp on uh, past that like it ain't even happened. Uh, my bad, y'all. Try to put me something together real quick. Baby been crying all day. But yeah, we said let's find that Penta, who has helped to fit out the ships to recruit seamen for the Enterprise, later felt that his services had been inadequately recognized and rewarded in 1515, 9 years after Columbus' death. An inquest was held as part of Faison's suit against the Columbus family. In the course of it, Faison's son swore that on the visit he and his father had made to Rome, his father had called on a friend who was a cosmographer at the Vatican Library. The friend had lent him a Hebrew document from the Papal Library. There were which said that Solomon's time it was believed that the Queen of Sheba had sailed out of the Mediterranean into the Atlantic, and there 95 degrees to the westward by an easy passage she found a land called Sapongo or Saponso. And if you know about Sapongo or Sapongu, then you know about Marco Polo, my man Genghis Khan, Fusang, Wahushin and Fusang the island. We start to notice that, Columbus couldn't have been first. And also right here we have where they said that the Ethiopians were already going this way. So we know about uh, uh, I can't Abu Bakr, I think is how you say his name, the African guy. Supposedly they said left off the west coast of Africa, but he went to Egypt first, to get, I guess, permission or whatever it was he needed in order to take this trip. And we gonna get into him too because I don't like the way people have been kind of like write him off, and if his story has some truth to it, that it should be recognized. And right now people ain't really trying to big up, I guess whatever know what the fight is about between African and America. But shout out to these Marvel motherfuckers. Hopefully we can get past some black and brown hate and figure out what the fuck we doing next, because the shit's getting out of hand. We taking a loss and everybody else winning, like I said. So one of these days we gonna realize that we are the indigenous people. We are the ones that stayed down and fought. We are the only ones who had a right really to be whining. It's Negroes and Mexicans, the indigenous people of the land. I guess if you want to call them Native Americans also, you know what I mean. But I lumped them right in there with the Vatos. You can say it's disrespectful, but it is what it is. They're cousins. We're all different type of mestizo. And now that you see that she was selling out of that way, we're gonna get into, like I said, these constellations that are honed over America. And once you know about the constellations of America, it tells you a lot about the legends of America. It tells you a lot about why people were over there studying their asses off. And let's talk about the Portuguese. The Portuguese, as you can see, because Columbus and them and their families are always connected to the Portuguese. The Portuguese and what we want to call them, the Phoenician Empire had knowledge of America before most people in Europe, and they wouldn't tell anybody. They just use it as a trading route, as a way to ball and look like the best niggas over there. And this is what caused the people to turn on them, because they've been hiding what they call, the Holy Land, or the land of milk and honey, and they've been sharing the knowledge. So we don't get into this book, New Light of the Great Pyramid. Only person I know besides me that's really been diving into this will be my man's Medicine Man, the Great Medicine Man. I found this by looking through that Masonry book, Ancient Mystic Orders of the Masonry book. I got that from that. Then I checked the sources, and then that led me there. So we're gonna get into that. One second, let me pause. Boom. Alright, so we just barely splashed into this one. But right here we gonna motherfucking just start reading it. It all start to make sense as we go through it. But it says the Sphinx, her place is like the Grecian myth, Hindu legend, and upon the astronomical plane spirit set around the ring fences and planetary orbits 7, the Hebrew adopted Virgo and Frico, which is the rabbins said signified the division of the 10 constellations. For long, the ancient Virgo, Scorpio, being divided, and the Libra introduced, thus making the 12 zodiacal houses instead of the earlier Sephirotic 10. So 2 houses, what they always say, they're missing. They said it was 12 tribes, it was 10 houses, all zodiac houses. Your house falls underneath the zodiac sign. But it says that obviously there was 2 tribes that have been grafted in from 180 to 180 degrees to 150 degrees west longitude falls to Libra. The conjunction of Leo and Virgo over the lost continent of the Pacific Ocean explains the meaning of the Sphinx, uniting the head of the Virgo with the body of the lion. The offspring of the Chimera and the monsters of fire and water thus affords the clue of disaster, after which the Sun of Righteousness arose with healing in the wings. As we see in Egyptian emblems close by the Star of Debola, the overlapping Virgo, so the positions of Libra, or the balance immediately in connection with Leo and Virgo, reminds us that the crucial importance of the doctrine of equilibrium of balance, the book of concealed mysteries in the Hebrew Kabbalah. We know that racist. Libra is the hieroglyphic of Egypt, measuring the wings in the hollow of his hands, and the doctrine is still represented among the civilized nations in the combinations of the figure Virgo and the signs of balance in the familiar form of the astral goddess of justice holding the scales. It is very remarkable that the signs of Libra, according to Godfrey Higgins, the great badge of Roman Catholic Church, as placed on the breast of the Pope, the badge represents the human or the Jesus condition of Christos, the descender into the pit who rises under the sign of Libra, or the balance of restoration or equilibrium or balance, the sun of righteousness with the healing in his wings. From the Egyptian temple of Luxor or Lucifer, observers of the American symbol of the serpent and the eagle wings. From 150 to 120 degrees west longitude falls Scorpio, a sign, a curse pertaining to the typhoon and his reign. It was when the sun was in Scorpio that El Osiris or El Azar or Israel Lee Azaric Sisera died. Scorpio was the emblem of the tribe of Dan, but we are told that the tribe rejected it for the eagle aloft bearing the serpent in its talons. So it says that the tribe of Dan were the serpents, but they didn't want that. They wanted to be under the land of the eagle. So we know the tribe of Dan rules over Europe. And where did they want? They wanted the land of the eagle. Where is the eagle constellation fixed over? America. So we're going to keep on moving. We're going to find out why these Ethiopians, these North Africans, these South Europeans wanted to come over to America always. Okay. Let's see. They rejected it for the eagle, aloft bearing the serpent in his talons. Scorpio falls to the western North America, like I said, and here we find overhead the constellation of Hercules, who was attacked at birth by two fiery serpents. It is well known that by Hercules it was meant the sun, and this the 12 laborers referred to the 12 zodiacal signs, says Parkhurst. The laborers of Hercules seem to have had still higher views and to have been emblematic memorials of what the real Son of God and Savior of the world was to do, is to suffer for our sakes. So basically, as they're telling you, we know that Hercules went to get the golden apples. We'll get into that also, going into the Edda Bible. The Edda Bible has a whole bunch of bullshit in it, but there's a whole lot of truth in it, A lot of these people were trained to tell you two lies, and two small truths and a really big lie. So you gotta, what do they say? Eat the meat, spit out the bones. You know what I'm saying? Take the baby out the bathwater. It'll all make sense in a little bit. Also, I guess maybe in some ways they felt like it was get back. Because if you remember what Plato said, that let's go over there and talk to Plato.
Oriental Masonry. 27. America, Atlantis, and as the curtain which has hitherto concealed the prehistoric connection between the peoples of ancient Egypt and of America, is lifted, it will be seen that, the people of the eagle on the Nile being descended from the original people of the eagle on this continent, the twain are one, and that prehistoric America was the original Egypt or Eagle Land, prior to the mighty dispensation in the days of Peleg. When the earth was divided, and the great globe itself was nearly rent asunder, Atlantis as an island larger than Libya and Asia Minor put together, located in the Atlantic just beyond the Pillars of Hercules, generally assumed to mean the Strait of Gibraltar. Its culture was advanced and it had a constitution suspiciously similar to the one outlined in Plato's Republic. It was protected by the god Poseidon, who made his son Atlas king and namesake of the island and the ocean that surrounded it. As the Atlanteans grew powerful, their ethics declined. Their armies eventually conquered Africa as far as Egypt and Europe as far as Tyrrhenia, Etruscan Italy, before being driven back by an Athenian-led alliance. Later, by way of divine punishment, the island was beset by earthquakes and floods, and sank into a muddy sea.
So as you can see, it was like get back for a situation that, the Americans, us Americans that went over there set tripping first, and they came back with some get back, and now, we're living the karma out, I guess. I'm not sure how long that's gonna last, but hey, we're paying for our past mistakes, you feel me? So let's keep it moving. It says, as the Orphic hymn says of Hercules, besides Hercules strangling the two serpents sent to destroy him in his cradle, they're exploited to perform by him even before alchemy or alkalon brought him into the world, says Apollodorus of the War of the Giants in Heaven. And some of them talk of an oracle of a tradition in heaven that the gods could never conquer the giants without the assistance of man, Adam Kadam. Here, two overheads of Ophiuchus, my bad, the serpent bearer, while near by over the heart of the United States of America. Here overhead is Ophiuchus, the serpent bearer, while near by over the heart of the United States of America. Appears that only the eagle knows the astronomy, one towards the north and the other towards the south. Our eagle therefore is not a borrowed bird, but after all, but it is a territorial heraldic birthright, a set apart for America in the stars unknown ages ago. But the eagle more later on the presence in America of dance emblems reminds us that the Indians in their worship of the Great Spirit had no image of the deity, but like the Hebrews possessed a portable ark in which the deity was continually and specially presented, as which is regarded as too sacred to be touched by any profane hand. Moreover, like the Hebrews, the Indian had some living creature from the emblem of each tribe. Furthermore, that as King David danced around the ark in the circling course, repeating like all ancient religious dances the course of the planets around the sun, so that the ancient Indians of America celebrated the November or Pleiades festival of the dead, and chanting Hallelujah, Jehovah, and dancing around a sacred fire with Taurus horns upon their heads, like the horns of the Jewish altar of burnt offerings. According to Bernal Diaz Montezuma, said to Cortez in regards to the creation of the world, our beliefs are the same. Sir Daniel Wilson says the conservative powers of language is indisputable, and that the kinship now claimed for the polysynthetic language of both hemispheres be correct. We are on the threshold of a significant disclosure. Gregg's Comparative Philology of the Old and New Worlds, London, 1893. The New World resembles common to the Old World. It really remarkable, as certainly not accidental in the probability, in parts directly imported, and in part resulting from what I believe to be an archaic resendum common to most in all languages. Haley was a burden of every verse of a Peruvian song composed in honor of the son of the Incas add this.
(427 to 47). 40. Cortes and Montezuma. Know that we are not descended from the original people of this land. Our ancestors came from over the sea, and the prince of that country came here and lived among us for a time. Long have we looked for his descendants from that country where the sun rises, and so, from what you say of this wonderful king of yours, I believe that he is the descendant whom we should acknowledge. We are indeed those of whose coming your oracles have prophesied, replied Cortes. We come from the great monarch, Don Carlos, who has many princes subject to him. Hearing of the fame of the great Montezuma, he sent us in his name to thee that we might tell thee of the true religion, the true Christian faith. Whatever is mine is at your disposal, said the courteous Montezuma. I trust that you will feel that you are in your own home, in your own land. Rest and refresh yourselves, for your journey here has been hard indeed. And now Montezuma signaled his slaves, who advanced, bearing magnificent presents for Cortes, his officers, and every soldier. For Montezuma was generous and wholehearted, and as far from greed and avarice as Cortes was close to it. Rising, Montezuma said, I go now to my dwelling. I shall order that everything be done for your comfort and.
As we see, Montezuma tells you he is not a descendant of the Olmecs, nor the Toltecs. The Toltecs give you a story of them coming across the water too, across the Great Water. They had been taking routes over here just as well. They're the Asian nations that came with your boy Marco Polo. And as you know, your boy got those books from the Queen of Sheba, who received those, who gave Marco Polo and them the knowledge of how to get here, because they are Solomon, who also, I'm going to guess, is who they're calling Prester John, or, Prester John's fabled routes to his land of no death, which we call the underworld, where nobody dies. But we're going to get into that too, so let's just keep it moving. The Jah, the sacred name of the Hebrews, Arispis, and we have the origins of the ascription Hallelujah, or Helio Shalave. Connection between the Indians and the Hebrews are cited in the Mexican scholars Melgar in the following list of words. We got Canaan, Sinai, the wound down flying swan as an emblem of stick in America appears the beginning of Wagner's Redemption play. It's a deity, Elab, Elab, September, Tisquin, Tisquire. So you see, they just running through a little language, you can play with that if you want to. Again, in English, we speak of the sun rays. The Egyptian worshipped the sun of righteousness with healing in his wings under the name of Ra, or Rana was a god of the Toltecs, or Rami was the great festival of the sun in Peruvians. Rayam was a god of Yemen, and Abram was the father of the children of Israel, and Raphael, the angel of the sun. Says Donnelly in Atlantis, the presence of the Semitic race in Europe is inexplicable without the Western world. It is intrusive race, a race colonized on the seacoast, where are its old world affinities? So, okay, let's go one more time. It says Donnelly in Atlantis, the presence of the Semitic race in Europe is in, inapplicable without the Western world. It is an intrusive race, a race colonized on seacoasts where are the old affinities. The civilization of the Nile Valley was transported there from some other region. Rollins says in his notorious that however far back we go, we find no rude or uncivilized time out of which civilization is developed in Egypt. Another Egyptologist remarks that as soon as men were planted on the banks of the Nile, that they were already the cleverest men that ever lived and endowed with more knowledge and more power than the successors attained to, says Le Plongeon. The explorers of the Yucatan, the ancient Maya hieratic alphabet discovered by me is the near like to the ancient hieratic alphabet of the Egyptians as two alphabets can possibly be, forcing upon the conclusion that either the Mayans or the Egyptians learned the art of writing from the same master, or else the Egyptians learned it from the Mayas. The legends accompany the images of several of the Egyptian deities when interpreted by the Mayan language point directly to Mayak as the birthplace of the Egyptian civilization. There is every reason to believe that the cosmological conceptions so widely spread originated with the Mayas and were communicated by them to all the nations among which we find the name. The name Maya is met with in many countries as Asia, Africa, and Europe, as well as in the Americas, and always with the meaning of wisdom and power attached to it. Whereas we find the name there also, we still find vestiges of the language and customs of the religion and the cosmological and historical traditions of the Maya. The traditions recorded in the sacred books of various nations are regarded as primitive history of mankind. Among the early Greeks, Pan was the ancient god. His wife was Maya. Pan was adored in all parts of Mexico and Central America, where the Mayas still survive, at the Pontugo or the Panopolis, where the Spaniards entered it and found superb temples and images of Pan. So if you always think about your Moche culture or your Moshe culture, and you look up the sex pottery, you'll see a bunch of big dick statues and shit. We will put that on here, but I don't want to get flagged. You know, they be tripping about the little pettiest shit, so we ain't even gonna put the Moche statues. But if you want to look up Moche sex statues, you'll see the iconic. They have like their own little porno going on. It was anal sex, it was fellatio, 69, all the freaky shit. So you can see how Christianity, whenever it came into being, especially after going into Mexico and all that, they wrote it off as this is the evilest place in the world because of the freedom, you know, to just do what you want to do. So, but let's keep it moving. Maya is the name of the peninsula of the Maya Pond, where the name of the ancient capital, Panuco, was therefore the first name given to the Spaniards to the present Mississippi River. So, you know about the Olmecs and Voltan and all them, they came out of the Mississippi area to the southeast, and they moved down into Mexico before being removed by the Aztecs and the Toltecs. They moved back into the southeast and created what you know is the Creek and the Choctaw and all your Muskogee tribes, basically going from Texas all the way over to what you would say North Carolina, and then some parts of the Powhatan tribe are also connected to the Mayans and the Olmecs. With the Aztecs, as we just heard, the most famous Aztecs say they do not descend from the original people of this land. So let's keep it visual. In Hibbert's lectures for 1884, Professor Rabal alludes explicitly to the resemblance of the Maya civilization to that of the ancient Canaan. The Great Pyramids is said to have been built by invaders of the valley of the Nile. In ancient Peru stands the ruins of pyramids and other gigantic works in stone whose designs and specific characteristics of execution remind the archaeologists of nothing save the similar but far later works on the Nile. In ancient Peru, the divisions of the land was modified by an annual revision, and new partitions took place according to the numbers and members of each family. This was, of course, the agrarian law. Private property, as we understand it, does not appear to have existed. Besides the lands belonging to the community and divisible among all of its members, there were others, and these not at least important, forming the exclusive property of the son of the Incas. So the Incas came in and they started to bring the knowledge of owning property, of being landowners, of being the ones to own it. We will get back. Also, you have to remember, before your Olmec, you had your Mokaya, the Mokya. We'll look at them and what they look like in a second too. So I always say your Olmec are the mixture between the Mokya and the Mongolian nations that came in to end up creating the Toltecs and the Aztecs and Mixtecs and all those going up your west coast. Let's keep it moving. Okay. Similarly, among the Hebrew, property could not pass out of the family. It sold mortgages or seized by creditors. It reverted to the former owner in the following year of the Jubilee. The Peruvians were the children of the sun. The Hebrews were the children of Israel, El, Allah, deity, Elus, the star, Helios, the sun. Dr. Falab or Benia announces Nanu, free or Presi or Vinet, the discovery that the relations of the Kwakia and the Amaria languages to the Aryan and Semitic languages is very close. The common stems of all variants between the Aryans and Semitic tongues are found in their purest conditions in the Kwakia and the Amara, whence it follows that the plains of Peru and Bolivia were the point of exit of present human race. So if that's what they think the present human race left out of, that'd be the same place Lucia and different people are credited as coming from.
Clavigero describes the Aztecs as reduced to slavery and in the lowest state of degradation under the insignificant Colhuas, but he acknowledges that Chechimecas, Aztecs, and Mexicans are frequently called, in history, Mexicans without discrimination, volume E, page 202, or distinguishing the Mexicans from those who arrived before them. It may be allowed, as they spoke the same language, Clavigero, volume I, page 107, that Montezuma's race were Aztecs, but the following reasons are offered why they arrived by sea and not with the 7 tribes. Indian tribes are located, is bounded on the north by the state of Kansas, on the south by Texas, on the east by Missouri and Arkansas, and on the west by Texas and the territory of New Mexico. It contains about 70,000 square miles, or a larger area than the 6 New England states combined. In agricultural CE advantages and delightful climate, it is unsurpassed by from any section of the country of equal extent. The south half of it is excellent for cotton, while common wheat and the best of fruits are produced in all its settled RTS of portions. It rivals Texas as a stock country and is so much superior to Kansas in this respect. Coal, iron, miles lead, zinc, copper, and salt and petroleum springs abound throughout the territory. The coal is bituminous and lignite and is of a very superior quality. None but surface measures have as yet been developed. NTO of these, at the Kansas line, are found 18 inches in thick UVLIC. Ness. They increase as you travel south until near the southern boundary of the territory. They are 6 feet thick. Peru. NECTS. 2000. Arica. Enyet. Wealth. Dorax. Clued. Amen. Eline.
Says the principal tribes occurring in the country are the Cherokees in the north, and the Creeks and Seminoles in the middle, and the Choctaws and Chickasaws in the south. They are known as the 5 civilized tribes. All of them except the Seminoles have a written constitution and a code of laws. These Indians have traditions that almost 400 years ago they occupied extensive territory in the northwestern part of Mexico. They probably belonged to the Aztec Empire, but we know it's the Olmec Empire. The Aztecs kicked them out. After the fall of Montezuma, they moved in a body across the continent to the shores of the Atlantic, being 15 years on the journey and fighting and conquering all hostile tribes that opposed them. And they adopted the vanquished, while many of the weaker tribes sought the alliances for protection. Remnants of the Uchis, Alabamas, fire-worshipping Natchez, and other once powerful tribes may be seen today among the Cherokees and the Creeks. None of these obliterated. The mythic meaning of the priest, Greek priest, is one who stands on the outer border. Peru was the outer border of the ancient world empire of Atlantis. The Peruvians designated the large collections of tribes and nations who were under the scepter of the Incas by the epithet Taba Sintisuyu, i.e., 4/4 of the world. The Persians' Mithric baptismal font were regarded as Egyptian origins. In Egypt, as Peru, the water used the immersions absolutely cleanse the soul, and the person is said to be regenerated. So now we're talking about Prester John's, like I said, Fountain of Youth. We'll go over that one more time. The Persian Mithric baptismal font was regarded as Egyptian origin. In Egyptian, as Peru, the water used in immersion absolutely cleansed the soul, and the person was said to be regenerated. Paganism surviving in Christianity. The Egyptian name for the phoenix was the Fanat, i.e., supreme ruler. PH stands for the, and Nick may be rendered Incan, the sun, or of the sun, the supreme ruler of Peru. Von Rekrat, Menes, or Chiapas, Peruvian, Persian, or Hebrew, all worship the deity as a consuming fire, or emitted the divine dealings in casting fire from the heavens upon the guilty men by throwing offenders into the flames, and by systematic sacrifice upon fiery altars. Such as points of similarity lend great interest to the fact that the Egyptians named the Hebrew was Aperu or Apuria, with the P replacing the cognate B. Egypt and Babylon, Ra the sun. The supposition is also almost justified, says Capnus, Mysteries of the Ages, that in the Hebrew impossible, also the Persian, we behold tribes of the ancient Atlantis. The terror of the catastrophe of the destroyed their continent may have so impressed itself upon the minds and hereditary that the Hebrews' conception of God were more inclined to fear than love. It may also have been such an event as to appear like a divine judgment that caused the minds of the ancient Persians to make devils of the Hindu deities Deva, which devil signified a deity, and contrawise deities in Hindu devils. The book Genesis opens with the creation of the world by Elohim or Elohim, and the sacred books of the Clichés Alam is the engender. He was who gives beings. In the book of Revelations, we read of him who is the Alpha and Omega. In the Greek mysteries, we use the word nous or panax, words foreign to Greek tongue and unintelligible to the commentators of the Hindu mysteries. The same words appear as Kanasha, words equally foreign to the Sanskrit and obviously of tradition origins like amen in English. It's Central American, the same words as are found in Conex on Panex. All familiar words of the Mayan tongue meaning ghost, stranger, dispersed. Thus corresponding to the Inamices, whence the name Mass, from the Catholic sacrament Amam, meaning stranger. I am Alpha and Omega, reminds one of Alpha, Aleph, Ox, Taurus, Torah, Dor. Now, according to the ancient system Taurus, that the seat of the central sun system of the Pleiades drove the universe before its horns. The Hindu name for the Taurus, Elephant, was Ganeshapal, represented in India as red-colored man with an elephant head. Ganeshapal is a god of wisdom, prudence, and letters. Sounds like our man Thoth. And Thoth came over and conquered Egypt after, same sounds like our man who they would call Kukulkan Khan or Quetzalcoatl or Votan, same person who's been giving people this, they saying it gave him this knowledge. They try to call them white gods, but we'll get into who these white gods are supposedly in a little bit. But let's get back to and Maya means head. As an English poll tax, the Lipijan identify the Hindus, Ganesha, and the Mayans connects the serpents or elephant trunks, the serpentine trunk symbolizing the old serpent, while the tusks represented the horns of Taurus. Thus we are reminded of both Conex Amon Panex, I am Alpha and Omega, and the constellation Taurus by the familiar hymn, beholds a stranger at the door. These are coincidences of a sort which must not be neglected if any considerable portion of the history of the past is ever to be recovered. Coincidences of the same order as the long separated parts of a piece of a mechanism which, when finally put together again, constitutes a compass to guide our footsteps right through the bewilderment produced by seeing the sun of the Catholic Christianity turn back to 10 degrees of thousands of years upon the dial of history. But Dan has to do with the next constellation, Sagittarius in Sanskrit. Sagittarius is Danas, a bow, or a Danasan, or arrow. We shall hereafter recognize the Danasan, the great Dionysus, who made conquest of all Europe and Asia with the red host from Meru. In Hebrew, Dan, the judging ruling as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan is the serpent, Ophiuchus by the way, an adder by the path, which is biting the horse's heels, and the rider falleth backwards. We know Sagittarius gets bit in the heels by a snake and he falls backwards, which follows you over to the swan and the eagle, which will take you to America. So if you understand that, you understand the sailing route that everybody uses, or the constellation route of how you sail, using the stars. Sagittarius, with drawn bow and arrow, covers the central regions of America from 120 to 90 degrees west longitude. Here, more precisely, we find already mentioned celestial eagle and the bird of Jove and Nisroch, or the Syrian sculptures, which constellation occupies the first decan of Sagittarius in the ancient Persian spheres. Close by Aquila, the eagle, lies the splendid constellation of Cygnus, the swan, whose chief status and form athwart the Milky Way, a splendid cross pronounced by Protector, a finer object than far famed Southern Cross, which also lies in the Milky Way south of the equator. Like the eagle upward, onward, let the soul in faith be bore, calmly gazing skyward, turn where the cross, God's love revealing, sets fetid spirits free, where it sheds the wondrous healing, there my soul the rest shall be. Cygnus the swan was said to be the shape in which Jupiter visited Leda, or Prelude, causing her to bring forth the ill-starred Gemini. This might signify a solar attracted leading to the drawing aside of some planetary mass and subsequent division into two mutually destructive bodies whose change of equilibrium and balance were fraught with disaster and disorder. Throughout the solar system, certainly the relations of the watery constellation Aquarius Reuben to the Arabian star Bilba are more tolerable, viewed astronomically, than read as human history. The Sagittarius constellation of the eagle and the swan remind us that, according to Pletcher's eagle and the swan came from a remote part of the earth. The Canaanites, the Cygnites, and the Swanites were a sister tribe of the Mizrahites. They held a heifer or a cow Taurus in high estimation. This may explain why they are their near connections. The builders of the American pyramids chose 30 degrees east longitude as the site of the Great Pyramid, which monumentalizes this entire astronomical geographical system. In early times, colonies went by the name of the deity that they worshiped, or the name of the insignia of the hieroglyphic under which the country was denoted. Every act of such people was placed in an account of the deity under such vice. Thus insisted of saying that the Egyptians' eagle or the Canaanite swan did such and such things. They said it was done by Jupiter, who were Ammonian priests came to the Attica under the conduct of Jupiter in the shape of an eagle. By this is meant that they were Egyptian priests, and eagles was the device in which their standard as well as insignia of their nation. Some of the same family were found among the Atlantis survivors of the lost Atlantis in the Atlantic Ocean who escaped to reside in Mauritania. According to Prescott, the great standard of arms and Republic of Tlaxcala was golden eagle with outspread wings in the fashion of the Roman cygnus, richly ornated with emblems of silverwork. So as you can see, we have the Egyptians underneath the Ammonian priests. So you see that, and they say the Canaanites and the eagles of America. Oh shit. Alright, so basically, you know what I'm saying? We have them telling you how America invaded all the countries over there, even down to Mauritania. Certain families were found using these insignias over there that show where their family's allegiance lied. But once you get separated and you've been gone so long, you forget where you're from, and then you come back and you tear up the damn Holy Land. You gotta look at how they did it. Look at America now. They raped and pillaged it. The United States standards appropriately exhibited the arrows of Sagittarius and the talons of the national eagle, while the Great Pyramid itself is the key to the whole geographical system. You're going to have to say that was astronomic geographical system forms the reserves of the Great Seal of the Secretary of the State of the United States, and the memory of the first president, father of our country, is honored by the grandest obelisk ever erected. Great crisis in human experience often brings the surface of unsuspected things previously hidden in the depths of the heraldry consciousness of the race. Thus, a time of fierce religious persecution on the continent produced a strange phenomenon of a boy preacher whose impassioned discourse improved through hours at a time were applicable to the authorities who held them under arrest only under the hypothesis of diabolic possession. Thus, too, at the close of the long struggle for independence, the lately hereditary consciousness of a people, henceforth to be entrusted with the destinies of the old world, being stirred to the very depths and manifested in the spontaneously and without reflection in the choice for the national insignia of the pyramid, the obelisk, the eagle, the azure expanse, the stars which fought in their course against King George, as once this self-same continent that had fought against Caesarea, and the continent that had the Crimson Stripe, which were the healing nations, while at the first seat of the government of New York City, the self-same groundswell and deep-seated Egyptians brought into existence the Egyptian architecture of both the prisons known as the tombs and equally the Egyptian city reservoir. That the architectural bent had previously manifested itself on this side of the Atlantic is shown by the venerable ruins of Uxmal and Chichen in the Yucatan, directly south of the Mississippi, where where there are massive stone pyramids so ancient that they support trees growing in the soil deposited on the summits from the atmosphere during the thousands of years of pyramids, which were old before the days of, of the pharaohs. It has been a standing source of regret to American artists that the suppose our country had been heraldic insignia its own, far from the being true. We see the guides by the same power which determines not only the destiny of races, but also the physiognomy the great republic entered at the hour of her birth. Its full possession and the magnificent equipment and insignia purely and solely her own. Demonstrations that the Republic does not display borrowed crests and coats of arms should secure to the national emblem proper appreciation and careful protection by legislation from being either vulgarized or sordid purposes of trade or profaned by partisan misuse. Let it let it then go forth to the nations of the world, and this year, 1893, being the 170th year in the national existence and the 401st year since the rediscovery of the continent by Columbus, that over America alone does the eagle occupy his original and rightful position in the skies, the eagle of all other nations being either appropriated without archaeological or astronomical warrant, or inherited from an ancestor driven by cataclysm above, a war below, far from the ancient home to which the emblem of the eagle forever points. Centuries before the Christian era, teachers of the Pythagoras had taught that the earth is a sphere, and that the water bounding Europe on the west washed the shores of Asia on the east, but the law of gravitation had not been discovered, and the world found it impossible to conceive of a hemisphere in which trees would grow downward into the air and men walk with their heads suspended, similar in spite of the plainest facts that the universal history saw from modern modes of thought and notions of divinity, and thus shapes that the end of the nation of individuals that cultured people of today find impossible to perceive in such startling combinations that operations of fixed law, preferring to attribute them to distinguished German philosopher terms the unfailing refuge of weak-minded accidental coincidence. That the laws are still in operation is obvious to the attentive student of revolutionary and contemporaneous events. Thus, the eagle was adopted as a standard of United States of America, not by chance or inadvertentness, but deliberately, and in spite of the outspoken opposition. Influential men such as Benjamin Franklin, who disliked of the eagle as the emblem of the republic, was also shared by the great Audubon. Again, in 1782, the Great Pyramid was chosen particularly without debate from a number of designs for the reserve of the Great Seal of the United States of America by the ancestors who wrought more wisely than they knew. In 1882, the bronze Tatars of England and America, the only nations upon the face of the earth called brethren, land together upon the shores of the Delta and the Nile. And the first time since the independence of the flag of the United States and the Great Britain were born side by side was the streets of Alexandria. The United States flag was displayed upon staffs bearing the eagle of ancient Egypt and America, while the British flag was the cross modified of ancient Canaan in America. In the same year, both England and America struck commemorative medals upon reserved faces to two of the most mysterious emblems, Egypt and the Sphinx and the pyramid, were severely displayed as central devices. See, an important question. John Wiley, Sons of New York City, and Piazzi's, I don't know what that is. The correct is seen that the Sphinx and the Canaanitish work, it was appropriate that England floating upon her flag the cross of cygnus in Canada, such have displayed the Sphinx upon her medals, while United States Egyptians or eagles displayed the pyramid. In the same year, 1882, the cities of London and New York were respectively graced each with one of the two obelisks that were Our Father Joseph and Mary. The Prince of Asenath had stood on each side of the portal of her father's temple. Meanwhile, the memory of Washington has raised an obelisk which is the loftiest earthly structure, overtopping even the Great Pyramid. The British people belong to the Teutonic, ancient Titanic, Atlantean race, and the Titan family occupies the throne of the empire. Let us consider the estimate placed upon the moral characters influenced by the destiny of Great Britain and the English tongue by the Englishmen, long residents of India. The English nation possesses the intellectual bound to restrain dialect and control energy, in which French is explosive, but Britain's real strength is dependent on much upon the moral consciousness and conviction upon the concentration of ultimate physical energy. The conjunction of the two make her great. It should be especially remembered when discussing the matters as that goodness. Constellation of Joseph was the sacred bull Taurus, identification of the modern Englishman and American as Saxons and Isaac's son, which the tribes of Joseph's son Ephraim and Manasseh suggests a significance of the subsequent John Bull and brothers Jonathan, the presence. That ain't about shit. We almost done, y'all. Looking inward, it can act outward. Only thought that the intellect upon which the limbs it is dependent intellect in ungenerated state positively, mightily in action, regenerate states, it becomes both mighty and positively good. It is present moral life of written in which all good, tender, emotional principles are displayed, and subsequent by hard, self-reliant intellect. They are necessary in the depths of insistencies, and we ain't trying to hear all that bullshit about Great Britain. We know them ain't the real Britons, but we gonna keep pushing because there's something I wanted y'all to get. Okay, let's start at the bottom. Herein says lays upon open changes in national hypocrisy by with Hall for general nobility and character she has no equal. In Le Pujon's Sacred Mysteries of the Quiché, the hieroglyphs of the Mayas of the Yucatan are placed in parallel columns with Egyptian hieroglyphs, and thus the inscriptions of the ancient pyramid builders in Central America are shown to be the work of the subsequent builders upon the Nile. The great earthworks of the ancient race of the Ohio Valley were examined by late Sir Daniel Wilson, who described them as characterized by the perplexing elements of elaborate geometrical figures executed in gigantic scale, giving proof of skill fully equaling that of scientific land surveyors. The group of symmetrical enclosures, square, circular, elliptical, octagonal, connected by long parallel avenues, suggest analogies even with the Temple of the Sphinx, avenues of the Egyptian cataract and Luxor. There were sun worshippers and maintained a perpetual fire. Now the Ohio Valley was the ancient seat of the Creek Indians, who are supposed to represent the powerful Talagwe or the Talagwe nation, whose name survives in the Allegheny Mountains. Allegheny, no, it's not the Alleghenies. The Alleghenies were enslaved and sent to the islands. But the Creeks are just the Westos or the Sioux or the Algonquins. I don't want to call them Algonquins. They are the I can't remember what the other language up there is. It's not Algonquin, but if I could remember it, I'll tell y'all. Allegheny Mountains. In Greek of Homer says, Count Volney, I find the customs and discourses and manners of the Iroquois, Delaware, and the Miamis, and the tragedies of Sophilius and Euphedius paint to me almost literally the sentiments of the red men, respecting necessarily fatally the miseries of human life and the reign of blind destiny. I don't know why old boy gotta speak so poetically. Why he can't just write how he feeling, man? But I guess this is 200 years old, 100 and some years old book. Recently, in translating the New York Testament into the language of the Creek, the New Testament into the language of the Creek Indians, the construction of the Creek language was found remarkably like Greek. American students of classic may yet find that we are more to Hecuba and Hecuba to us than has been dreamed on. The philosophers compare the following specimens vocabularies for the Greek Apollo. We have the Creek or the Indian Appalachians mountain, or the Mount Olympus or Mount Olemi, or the Potmus, the Potomac River, or the Tallahassee, or the Tallahassee. So we have the Creek. Let's just skip the Creek part. Indians of the Appalachian Mountains for Mount Olympus or Mount Olami, for Potmus or the Potomac River. So those are just some different correlations of America and the different stuff they use in their legends and mysteries. Of the incarnating Son of Righteousness, it is condemned, thou shalt call his name Jesus, and among the Algonquin Indians the name of the Son was Jesus. So let's read that one more time. Recently translating the New Testament into the language of the Creek Indians, the construction of the Creek language was found remarkably like Greek. American students of the classics may yet find that they are more like Hecuba and Hecuba to be than has been to us than has been dreamed. Hecuba and Hecuba to us than has been dreamed. And for our philosophies, compare the following specimens vocabularies. For the Greek Apollo, we have the Creek Indian Appalachian Mountains, Mount Olympus, Mount Olami. For the Potmos, the Potomac River. For the Tallahassee, we have the Tallahassee. Of the incarnated Son of Righteousness, it is commanded, thou shalt call his name Jesus. And among the Algonquin Indians, the name of the Son was Jesus. And the Son from sleep awakening started up to behold me. Jesus, the great Son, behold me. Krishna, the son of the Hindus, appears among the Blackfoot Indians in the following. The Son of Righteousness, the Fire King Moloch or Melchizedek or King of Righteousness, without father or mother or beginning or end of days, no night there, i.e. the light of the world, crystal, the day, the star from the high, great spirits, El, Helios, Apollo, Paul, or Saul, evil spirits, Hell, Apollyon, Saul, or Sheol. Again, the Greeks tell us of Ornadius, the heaven which Uriah the Indians call the blue heaven, or Anaya. Sir Dan Wilson, Plato tells of the priests of the Atlantic always wore blue mantles and administering justice of offering sacrifice. The assembled the people every 5th or 6th year, honoring the deity. 565 are the numbers of the sacred name of Jehovah. Professor Whitney says there are infinite possibilities of expression in the American language, and it would only need the sum of Native American Greek races should arise to find it is full of thought and fancy, and put to use the noble literature, and it would find rightfully admired as rich and flexible, perhaps beyond anything else in the world's new life, growth, and language. The Aborigines of America belong to the red race. Now, the most ancient divisions of the human race describe man as red, white, and black. During the sway of the Ethiop, whose name is derived from eighth fire or opus, the serpent, red or the phonic was a royal color, or red blood, not blue blood, and now was said to flow in the aristocrat's veins. The early atheist worship, says Major General Furlong, that the British Army in India were the true Maris or Merapis, and first, and the Tartars and Mongols. In the land were developed Aryans of the Skis. Humboldt says that the red race in the picture writing of Mexico, and the Etruscan reliefs of Tawaquini and the Nabu are saw the Ethiopians or the people of Meru, and the red Egyptian paintings, the Theban kings, and the copper-colored figures without beards in the caves of Central India. The tribes of Mexico remain a granite head buried under the gods or goddesses of serpents, other brute creatures, and very facsimiles of those in Egypt. The head added it might have been dug from the ruins of Thebes in early Greek times. The red Thracians, and passing through the land which he long had ruled, to settle the future Etheria, which Etrusco Ethiop affinities. Jove was painted in red on a high festival day. Noble Romans also adorned themselves with red on great occasions. Adam and Adamites were thought by Josephus to be the red earth race. Says Lach, Indignations of Genesis. The color of Esau denotes that he pertains to Heldic of the red race. This race excels in all the branches of literacy and scientific attain that give beauty and the strength to a nation. The history of the Heldic race shows that they were the most learned of the races preceding the deluge. Among them were the mighty men and the men of war, the judges, the prophets, the prudent, and the ancients of honorable men, and the counselors of the eloquent orator. The indignations are the Heldic built in the altar in the midst of Egypt, and the altar most probably is the Great Pyramid. This most people are eminently qualified, both physically and mentally, to erect such wonderful monuments, and the altars of witness, such as the altars must have been made as durable as time itself. Therefore, the Great Pyramids really is a altar erected by the Hittite of the red race. Then it must have been constructed between the years BC 13,465 and BC 12,098. Among the Greeks, who also find, besides Apollo, Crete, Indians, Appalachian Mountains with his lyra is set, and the skies adjoining Cygnus, the singing swan, and the true Canaan, now Canada, as the god of music, and the god of Pan, which his pipes, thus bringing the Pan pipes like a harp to the American soil. Still another striking coincidence is found in the following citations. Some fanciful tales of supernatural origins from the heart of the mountain, of the migration to the eastern seaboard, of subsequent return to the country of lakes and rivers, and where they finally settled, comprise, says Brownwell, in the Indian races of North and South America mostly. That is noticeable in the native traditions of the Six Nations, but says Daniel Wilson in Los Atlantis that the value of such traditionary transmissions of natural history among the unlettered tribes has received repeated confirmation, as the fanciful tales of a supernatural origin from the heart of the mountain is simply a literal rendering of the old Greek or Crete metaphors of the autochthonous of the children of the soil, symbolizing by the Athenians wearing the grasshopper in their hair. There lies before the vast, complicated problem in the America's race, says Professor Whitney, in their language that must do by far the greatest part of the work in solving it. Rhetoric was the cultivated the Indians' council house no less earnestly than the Athenians' Ekalish, or the Roman form, accurate reasoning, persuasive eloquence, demanding all discriminating refinements and grammar of choice of the terms in which the vocabulary supplies the vocabulary and use of some rural dialects of England has been found to include less than 300 words, whereas the Iroquois thought a untutored savage possessed a language marvelously systemized and beautifully in structure, well adapted to the requirements of intricate reasoning and persuasive subsibility. In its teaching of the pages of the American Greek race once conquered the world from this continent and was blotted out in a single dreadful night, leaving, however, the clearest traces of their former greatness in their rich, wretched survivors. So they said they still keep the culture, but they killed them off over there on that side of the world. They tried to eliminate them. My bad, y'all. I'm dragging y'all through this. You know what I'm saying? I won't make y'all go. I want y'all to get that Jesus part and certain other little parts. And try, but then we can come back into this book. Y'all just let me know in the comments if y'all really fucking with it. You know, because it gets deep. But they also tried to throw my mans in there. What's the dog's name?
Olmec, 1 of 3. Google, 443. Book L, Antiquities, 177. Of the Mississippi they are rarely encountered. It might be a curious inquiry, why in those regions, at present so thinly inhabited as Tartary and Siberia, these remains, which indicate a fixed population, should be chiefly found. It is fashionable to account for these things by the supposed revolutions of this earth. Perhaps the most rational mode of accounting for them is by our own ignorance. The Pyramids of Egypt are perhaps the oldest monuments of human labor in that country, so favorable to the production of a numerous population. The Pyramids of Mexico, which are but little known, and yet scarcely less considerable, like those of Egypt, have their origin hid in the night of oblivion. Humboldt is of opinion that these edifices must be classed with the pyramidal monuments of Asia, of which traces were found eves in Arcadia, for the conical mausoleum of Callistus was a true tumulus, covered with fruit trees, and served for a base to a small temple consecrated to Diana. The Greeks, who were successful in the chariot races at the Olympic Games, to show their gratitude to their horses, gave them an honorable burial, and even erected pyramids over their graves. The great altar of Jupiter, at Olympia, was nothing more than a huge mound of earth, with stone steps to ascend. Humboldt remarked with astonishment the striking similarity of the Asiatic and Egyptian pyramids to those of Mexico. The similarity of those which he describes to the mounds or pyramids on the Mississippi is still more striking, but not a matter of so much wonder. The only difference is that a few of the Mexican pyramids are larger, and some appear to have been façade with stone or brick. Like those of Mexico, wherever there has been a considerable town, we find right paths. I venture to make these observations here primarily, first, as leading me directly to the arguments which I have to adduce in support of my theories, and 2dly, because the learned Baron, in another part of the same work, and again in his last publication, Cosmos, seems to countenance the ideas of some others, who have held that there were originally various distinct creations of beings of the human race, contrary to our faith that God hath made of one blood all the nations upon earth. In the same chapter he says, perhaps this race of copper-colored men, comprehended under the general name of American Indians, is a mixture of Asiatic tribes, and the aborigines of this vast continent, as if the two races were essentially distinct from each other, and as if the copper-colored men, comprehended under the general name of American Indians, with all their mixtures, Could not all of them have been only different migrations of Asiatic tribes, earlier or later arrived on the new continent? In his last work, Cosmos, Baron von Humboldt expressly acknowledges the unity of the human species, but he seems at the same time to qualify this admission by quoting approvingly a passage in the works of John Muller thus: whether the existing races of men are descended from one or from several primitive men is a question not determined by experience. Supposing that the translations from which these quotations: First Origin of Man, 387, entire extent of North and South America, Australia, New Zealand, and the Isles of the Pacific, and the occupancy of these regions dated so far back as to develop in the inhabitants, under the operation of certain laws, but imperfectly understood, distinctive traits of national character. The primitive condition of these people, for the most part, was that of barbarians, but in a few instances, under favorable conditions of natural forces, they cultivated the arts, and developed a very considerable degree of civilization. We confess, in attempting to trace the career of man, that there are no continuous streams which enable us to ascend to the common fountain of life. The ancestry even of the most intellectual races, when traced back for a few thousand years, becomes involved in a Cimmerian darkness. Whence sprang the Celt or the Teuton? When did the Negroid type assume its distinctive features, and by what influences has it been perpetuated? How can we explain the primitive and unique character of American language? How explain the peopling of continents and the isles of the sea, girt by barren waters? In vain do we seek any meaning beyond being a common English or classical one, derives from West Africa. March was a Carolina Indian male slave, and we really do not know whether his name had an African or an Indian etymology or a combination thereof. Wally was another Negro name, perhaps so common because in Bambara it meant work or act and in Hausa a short walk. 20. It must be remembered, however, that coastal Georgia, that is, the Spanish province of Wally, for some years had been a prime source of Indian slaves. If the English name Wally has any camouflaged significance, one might do better looking to Spanish Guale rather than to African Nigeria and Mali. A popular American Negro name was Fanny, which can be traced to Europe. It should be kept in mind that Fanny also was the Chickasaw and Choctaw word for squirrel, Fanif in the Mobilian trade jargon. One also has to be cautious when insisting on the African origins of slave names such as Hagar, Haga, Lazy, Phoebe, Phoebe, Friday, Abby, Abba, Thursday, and many others, because Indians also bore these names. In these instances they probably did not have any hidden meaning, and those Negroes who were Indians were not trying consciously or subconsciously to perpetuate an African heritage. Spanish names, including Maria, Catharina, Juan, Antonio, and Francisco, appeared among Southern slaves, and without more information it is impossible to tell whether these Negroes were Africans or Indians. Considering the role played by Spanish and Portuguese slavers in Africa and by Spaniards in the West Indies, and taking into account that so many Florida Mission Indians had been captured, the presence of Spanish Christian names was inevitable. In South Carolina, a good guess is that more often than not they were Indians, especially, as will be seen, if they were females. Sometimes Negro slave names fairly clearly indicate Indian ancestry. For example, Deer, Buffalo, Maha, the hawthorn thriving throughout the South, or Redskin Peter. A geographic or tribal reference is a helpful but not infallible indication of Indian background, as in the instances of Appalachia, Muklasa, an Upper Creek town, Tamasi, a Cherokee town, Saponi, Colus, Notway, Ocala, House Pow, Huspaw, a Yamasee town, Altamaha, Siwi Joe, Maria Yamasee, and Tuscarora Betty. Other geographic names, for example Angola Phyllis, serve to identify Africans. Geographic references are not as helpful in all instances as one might think. To our surprise it turns on the Rhine, in France, Brittany, Italy, and other parts of the continent of Europe, as well as in Great Britain. Arrival of Danes at Waterford. The reinforcements which came to the Danes of Waterford are next mentioned, chap. XXVII. They are described as innumerable hordes, under the command of Ragnall, grandson of Ivar, and of the Earl Otter. This latter chieftain is not mentioned in the annals, although they record at AD 916, first year of Niall Glendubh, the arrival of Ragnall, grandson of Ivar, to reinforce the foreigners already established at Waterford. In chap. 35, we have mention of an earl called Otter Dubh, or the Black, who came with 100 ships to Waterford, and put all Munster under tribute. We read also in the Annals of Ulster, AD 913, of a Bered, son of Otter, who was killed in battle at the Isle of Man, by Ragnall, on his way to Waterford. Otter, or Otter, the father of this Bered, can scarcely have been the same Otter the Earl, who accompanied Ragnall 3 years afterwards as his ally and joint commander of reinforcements to the Danes of Waterford. After some exploits of minor importance, this party of Munster plundered 1 Waterford, called in the text Loch Daknech, the estuary or Bay of Decach, for so the word loch here signifies. See above, p. XXXIN. Decach, according to the Drimshan Chews, is the name of a woman. The Forum first mention the settlement of Danes in Waterford at AD 912 and ULT 913. Ragnall, he is called King of the Black Foreigners, or Danes, by the Four Masters, 915, ULT 916. At 913, Ul, and 912, 4M, we have reading. Mention of a great new fleet of Gentiles at Loch Decach. We ought. Lumna Vale Obla, Apud, Manainer, Inter, Bered May Neuter, et Ragnall Ua Imer, ubi Bered Pain cum omni exercita suo deletus est. NULT, 913. Dr. O'Connor, R. Lib. Script, IV, page 247, reads Bered Mo Noctir, a mistake for 3:07 p.m. 31%. Skin. 4 of 12. Plate 148. E-bit of red canoe in typical shell illustrating divergences between original red sketch and black finishing outlines. Sole example of water plant from Temple of Warriors group. The drawing is somewhat ambiguous, as if the painter had a double perspective in mind, enabling the flower to be viewed from above and in silhouette at the same time. Lower section portrays a cup-shaped blue and yellow flower attached to a tangled growth of green stem, while upper section somewhat resembles the water lily as it floats upon the surface.
Alright, y'all, it's been real, man. I'm gonna go ahead and get up out of here. Y'all see it's getting a little extra in the text messages. So y'all keep it player, man. It's OH. IO. Love y'all.